I think I was switching to recording. That's why something happened. Now it's
yeah. Now you're on the room audio also.
okay.
So welcome to the webinar organized by the IIT Alumni.
Again, we lost you. Anand, you are clipping. We can't hear you now. Can't hear you at all.
Few words about the Alumni Center Chennai and our webinar series. So the series, as I said earlier, brings together the best of the center's ecosystem in a mixed physical digital manner. The initial sessions were online only, and now we have moved to a mix of online and physical sessions. Many different themes resonate. Faculty Researcher of the Month, Voices of Excellence series, which is what we are having right now. We've had many eminent speakers before, Chris Gopalakrishnan, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy, Professor Ashok Junjunwala, Mr. N. Lakshminarayanan, and earlier Jayant Sinha, Dilip Shanghvi, Professor Paul Raj, and today we have the privilege of hosting Mr. Ramadorai. I'd like to welcome Mr. Ramadorai, and of course, he's an extraordinarily well-recognized global leader and technocrat. Participated in the Indian IT journey from a mere idea in the 1960s to a global giant today. He has captured this exciting journey in a wonderfully personalized book titled The TCS Story and Beyond, published in 2011. It's remained on the top of the charts. Recently, just a few weeks ago, the Tamil edition of that was launched in a very nice function at Kalakshetra. Mr. Ramadorai was the CEO of TCS from 1996, when the company's revenues were just about 150 million, and then led the company through several of its most exciting growth phase, including going public in 2004. And when he retired in 2009, October, as CEO, he left behind a $6 billion global IT services company to his successor. He was appointed vice chairman and retired from the board in October 2014 after an association of over 4 decades with the company. We'll be drilling down into a lot of his experience in TCS in the course of this interaction. Mr. Ramadorai was in public service from February 2011 to October 2016. During his tenure as the chairman of the National Skills Development Agency and the National Skills Development Corporation, his approach was to standardize the skilling effort to ensure quality and commonality of outcomes while leveraging technology to create an inclusive environment to collaborate, cooperate, and coexist. We strongly believe that empowering youth will be the right way to define the future of the country. Mr. Ramadorai is currently the chairman of the advisory board at Tata Strive, which is the Tata Group's CSR skill development initiative, and aims to address the pressing national need of skilling youth for employment. He's been the board of many companies and academic institutions, including the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He's the chairman of the Council of Management at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, chairperson of the governing board of Kalakshetra Foundation. And he's got a huge list of recognitions, and I don't think I'll do justice to all of them, including, of course, the Padma Bhushan, India's third highest civilian honor, the CBE, the Commander of the Order of the British Empire, for his contributions to Indo-British economic relations, and the Economic Times Lifetime Achievement Award, and of course, Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Engineering, where he's a fellow as well. He is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, which incidentally, sir, entitles you to be a member of the Alumni Center also. And we'd love to welcome you as a member anytime here, because you do come to Chennai quite often. And amongst your interests, which we'll drill down again, are passionate about photography and Indian classical music. Welcome again, sir. And for the physical audience here, please send me your questions through a written chat. For those in the digital audience, please put your questions on the chat, and then we'll try to get as many answers as possible onto Sir, so the first section of the questions for the next 10 minutes or so, can we get your perspectives on your leadership journey in TCS? Literally, it was a startup when you were in TCS, and today you're a world leader. TCS is a world leader, and I'm privileged to be the CTO of the company. Can you describe in your words, sir, the TCS leadership journey from startup to world leader?
Yeah, thank you, Anand. And it's great being a part of the webinar series of the IIT Alumni Center, Chennai. And the fact that you mentioned about being both online and in person makes it all the more exciting. I mean, the center itself, I've been a number of times, and recently I was there, and it has come out extremely well. I'm very pleased to see that there's a participation and a good amount of participation. The number of speakers whom you have chatted with as a fireside chat is very exciting. And I think I will answer the kind of questions which you have posed. From a startup to the kind of corporation TCS has built for itself, going public, like you said, in the year 2004, it was one of the most exciting journeys personally for me. And that's what I tried to capture in my English edition of the book, which came out in 2011. But in a way, when I returned in 1972, joined TCS from the US, working for the number 2 computer company, then NCR, where I was a diagnostic programmer, and I was offered a job by the Tata Group in the US. In fact, I was interviewed in Los Angeles saying that here is almost a startup. Would you like to make a career? So the first offshoring I did was bringing myself back to India. That was the first offshoring, a personal offshoring in a way. So I think history or time will tell whether that offshoring myself and joining a startup like TCS was worth it. And time has proven that we have big job in terms of what we built as a huge corporation. I think the journey was its own set of challenges. I was recruited by Mr. Kohli more as a hardware engineer because that was my area of expertise, both in terms of diagnostic programming and hardware maintenance on the Century series of computers, which was top of the line at that point in time. So the way we came back and then started applying for bringing the latest technology in the year 1974 when we imported a computer, a 1728. It was the latest state of the art in terms of microprogramming and assembly level programming. Otherwise, this country was used only to an IBM 1401 or IBM 1901 computers, whereas this one was advanced and the second machine out of the plant in California in a place called Bulita. So we had to be trained and we were sent on training, three of us, both on the hardware installation, maintenance, diagnostics, and then bringing it back and installing it at our Air India building facilities. That is history. From there, as a back office, converting the applications from an IBM or an ICL to a machine of Burroughs was the biggest challenge. And that's where we thought far ahead of the times. Number one, to bring in the state-of-the-art technology because India had an enormous amount of capability and absorption in terms of the people skills. But how do you own the people skills for the latest generation of technologies? And we took that risk to bringing those computers with the support of the leaders like Mr. Kohli or Mr. Palkiwala or the Tata Group itself, because they had put the trust in. And more importantly, we had to agree to certain terms of the government, namely 5 times the landed cost of the computer to be exported over a period of 5 years. I think these are what are the lessons when you look at a startup, to say that you got to be brave, you got to take the risks, you got to build a team, and then you got to generate the wealth, not only for yourself, but all the people who are the stakeholders. That's what happened when we roll back to 2004. From one shareholder, namely Tata Sons, to making 1.1 million shareholders overnight. And the responsibility that is put on the CEO is what the journey is all about. So the startup phase, as we say, we cleared the jungle for people to run on the highway, but it took longer than it would have because of the policy restrictions, because of the challenges. But more importantly, the biggest single resource and the single asset was people. Spotting the right people and collaborating and making them productive was the contribution we made to the industry. And the rest is history, I would say, because the history of 50 plus years, there have been only the fourth CEO today, and that makes all the difference, all the more exciting for a company in this journey. All of you, including you, have played such a critical role, and a lot of TCSers who may not be part of TCS, but that journey was the most exciting period. And that's what is happening in the startup ecosystem, where I'm playing an important role, both as a mentor as well as in a personal capacity. And that I'll describe as we go along. But I thought this is the quickest summary I could get in the 50-year history. And I've been watching it now from outside, rather than an insider. That's the exciting part.
Excellent, sir. So from that perspective, just switching gears, you talked about the importance of people and skills. You have, in your post-TCS career, you really went into the skills area in a tremendous way. Where did that come from, and how did you make that transition?
See, I'll again describe the incidences where TCS as a company experimented with a lot of things. You remember the Indian ITIs, the polytechnics which are there in the country, and the diploma that used to come from electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, etc. We brought in some of these people because they were extremely good with their hands into our operations side of the business, and gave them an opportunity to go into the mainstream in terms of computer programming or hardware maintenance, etc. So we had a history of looking at people who are different from the mainstream TCS and bringing them and then training them for the betterment of themselves as well as what the country needed. So as I was about to retire, when the previous government called me, and then the Prime Minister himself called me to say that the skills is a major problem. What do you think about it? I said, we need to scale up. We need that important because rolling up your sleeves and doing with whatever you can do in terms of skills was a critical need of the nation. I'll be honored to look at this, but the systems, processes, and the way we deploy it and the way we place people, the outcomes were more important than just input measures, which has been the biggest problem to crack. So I think then we started setting up the National Skill Development Agency, where the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission was involved along with me and a set of board members. And then we brought in the National Skill Development Corporation, where we brought in both the private sector people from NASCOM, from CII, from FICCI, etc., and then created what we called as the sector skill councils, and created the pathways for people to go from the mainstream skills to the educational space. So now we have addressed the scale problem, and the ministry was also formed subsequently when this government took over. And the ministry has taken over, and this is the first instance of a skill development agency getting folded into the ministry itself. And in terms of policy making and enabling the ministry to be formed was the biggest contribution. The policy measures with regard to implementation on the ground was through the National Skill Development Corporation, where the public-private partnership and funding the startups was a way of life. Now with the NEP under the leadership of Professor Kastur Rangan that has been announced, there is absolutely a critical component of skills and the pathways from skills to the mainstream education or vice versa. And that's what is going to be implemented as you look at it. But whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector or in the social sector, the scale of this problem is becoming very visible. Scale of the deployment is becoming very visible, and the CSR funds are being deployed as well as commercial operations are being run by startups. It's one of the most exciting of this nation building, where recognition of the prior learning as well as enabling people to choose their career, and we do not feel that the 10th graders and the 12th graders are a dropout because they can do a lot of things with their hands, which we need to recognize, and we need to celebrate their successes.
So we'll come back to this huge issue of skills and entrepreneurs and startups in a minute. I know that there are several of us who would like to understand the lesser known facets of your life, the art and culture, and the personal lessons, to know Ramadorai as a person. I mean, I've had the privilege of working closely with you for the last 3 decades now. But for our audience, would you like to shed some personal light on some of these things, sir?
No, I think the personal lessons which I've been practicing, and I've been practicing for the past probably 60, 70 years, is one of rigor in your conduct, which means if you're an early riser or a late night sleeper, doesn't matter. But certain habits like reading as a first thing every day, newer things and interdisciplinary things being read, and more so today with the technology possibilities which I made it, is one I would like to say. Second is notes taking with regard to everything which you read or everything which you observe in meetings or participate in meetings or participate in seminars, which has always stood you in good stead with regard to remembering what you heard, replaying it what you heard, but more importantly, applying what you heard in a number of contexts, and then sharing it with your colleagues, which many of us have experienced. And anything which you read, anything which you feel others should read, you share it openly. That is what has progressed in TCS with regard to your personalized learning to Nomax, which you started when you were also a part of that. So the whole digitization journey which took place and the personalization which took place as part of that are all an evolution which we started. So we practice some of those things. Today, the learning has become a lot more interdisciplinary, a lot more technology oriented, platform oriented. And that is most exciting because you can do it at your own time, at your own pace. And that's what I do. And that's what I preach to the startups day in and day out. To me, a personal journey of excellence where you practice what you preach. You give the sermons when you know you can deliver it. And you talk only when you have implemented something, which means make a promise which you can deliver, and don't promise what you can't deliver. These are some of the value systems which we have learned. And that's the personal journey. But today, what has changed in a personal journey is you measured yourself on the basis of financial rewards, namely the balance sheet, namely the revenue, namely the growth, cash, profitability, etc., etc. But today, because of the social initiatives, startup initiatives, etc., you measure yourself on the basis of impact you create, the lives you touch, the trajectory you change for people. And that's the most exciting part of it. And that's the measurement system which you put for yourself and put for the country or put for the organization you are a part of as a board member. So that's the most exciting personal journey. Read a lot, read in Tamil, read in English, of course, and read in Hindi sometimes. But I think this multidisciplinary, multi-language capabilities and technology touching all of us is the most exciting and an accelerated journey that's happening. So not a day goes by where you're not seeing something new or learning something, and you're not shy of learning from anybody younger than you or anybody who is hierarchically different. So hierarchies are no place in our professional well-being, and hierarchies is only outside for the sake of and structure in the organization. But more importantly, a distributed sharing of knowledge, and anytime, anywhere, any place, and sharing openly is the way we need to practice going into the future.
So what a set of nuggets. In fact, we were just remarking a couple of people in the audience who are taking notes now. And I do remember personally as well that you used to write notes meticulously, and then you used to come and give it to us and say, all right, this is what I noted, please publish it, make sure that people know about it and share it, and so on. So that comes so naturally to you. And some of the observations that you made on the impact to society today and the way it should be leads me to my next question, which is broadly on this notion of sustainability. You've been at it for quite a long part of your life, and now with the global focus on sustainability, I do remember that way back a decade plus ago, we had established the eco-sustainability business practice in TCS, and that was really far-sighted and full of vision. What is your view, sir, in terms of this global challenge, which is going to be with us for years, if not decades?
I think this is one of the most critical challenges humanity and the planet is going to be facing or is facing. Whether it concerns biodiversity, whether it concerns water, air, energy, waste disposal, all of these are integrated into the problems which we have to tackle, and tackle in a very, very accelerated manner. Every corporation, every individual, every small and medium enterprise, or anyone who is part of the energy consumption or waste generation or product consumption has to keep this at the center of anything which they think through. Whether they drive a business, whether they drive an automobile, whether they are part of the whole connectivity supply chain, I think this has become the center stage, and the accelerated reduction of carbon has become absolutely critical. I was just reading a bunch of articles of late, the kind of health issues and the nutrition issues which a country like ours is facing, and the lack of public health or lack of protein and the protein deficiency, malnutrition, etc. These challenges have to be faced head on and in a collaborative manner if you want to reduce the carbon footprint. Just the energy consumption in terms of the data centers which are there throughout the world and the way it is playing out, and how do you reduce the energy consumption in the data centers? How do you reduce the energy consumption in the automobile industry or the mobility industry? End to end, we need to look at. The whole concept of circular economy, where if you generate anything, you have to make sure that comes back to you to close the loop. So I think these we have now integrated with the commerce itself, with the economy. So the indexes which measure a performance and a sustainable cooperation, not only does it not generate the carbon footprint or the usage of water is less than what it took, what it is, the water consumption is much less than what you are going to get the input as. I think the most critical component is consciousness in this space, and then addressing this along with the economic development, sensitizing every citizen. It's a 1.3 billion population problem in India, whereas on a global basis, it's 7 to 8 or 9 billion population that needs to understand and address this. The current war in Ukraine, the kind of oil consumption, the disruption to the oil industry in terms of the Russian dependency by the European countries, or the outsourcing by the global corporations to India or Vietnam or Bangladesh or whatever it is, and the kind of wastages that got generated out of this, you cannot send a problem of a carbon emission from your country to another country and then say that we are carbon neutral. I think these issues are coming up in a global supply chain or a globally connected manner. But the sensitization of this has gone beyond simply talking about it. We have to do something, and we have to continuously accelerate doing something. That's why I see technology as a critical component of any measurement, any way we tackle these. Today is a sensor technology, an iPhone or a smartphone can measure anything which you want. That is for the agriculture, the flora and fauna, the soil, the water, the moisture, you name it. We are doing it quite a bit in most of the NGOs, but most of the corporations need to do that. The disposal of waste into the soil, because the food security is a problem which we are going to face in the future because of the water. How do you address food security? Can we do with microproteins and waterless growing of food? If the sunlight completely disappears because of the carbon emissions, or the amount of sunlight we get on the planet decreases, the food security is completely gone and you're not going to get anything. And how do you tackle such issues? These are the bigger issues and the broader issues which are posing a lot of challenges. It's a combination of multiple stakeholders doing that. What you did in TCA as the co-innovation network, where we extended the ecosystem beyond the corporation to some of the academics, some of the other corporations, and it's only scale-wise increasing. Today, the COVID-19, when it came, and the kind of platform and the kind of collaboration that took place to produce that vaccine is the acceleration we are looking on a day in and day out basis to address the climate change issue itself. But it's serious and it is real and it is late if you don't operate now.
So you've linked climate change, you talked about skills, societal challenges, responsibility, ecosystems coming together to solve this. It's too complex to be solved by any one individual, corporation, country. It has to be a collective effort. Which brings me to the role of research and development, sir, which is another very topic close to your heart. What does the larger research and development ecosystem look like in India from your perspective? You've seen it from the corporation perspective, from the government perspective, and you're active in so many academic institutions as well. What is our collective status right now in your view, and what is it that we need to do more to go from ideas to execution at scale?
I think the research agenda at the national level with the government has been fairly well institutionalized in the past, whether it was the DRDO lab, the CSIR labs, or the biotechnology, etc., etc. I think we have had a good foundation for basic research. The challenge there has been the application of the research itself, whether through patents or through mechanisms to share with the industry. And one of the earliest experiments we did, if you remember well in TCS, was when we collaborated with CSIR for the BioSuite, where it was joint collaboration when Dr. Mashelkar was the chairman of Director General of CSIR. And we did that and we produced the kind of assets and the tools for a drug discovery phase at that time. The public-private partnership is the second one. That's why I touched upon this example. The third one is with regard to the private industry itself spending amounts which are far less than what it is. It needs to be far more than what it is today. You take our own group, the kind of percentages with the 3 or 4 companies, namely Jaguar Land Rover, Tata Motors, Tata Steel, TCS, it almost accounts for 2.4% or little over 2.2% for the group itself. The question to ask is, if your group has got 80, 90, 100 companies, are we really spending in terms of absolute dollars or absolute rupees the kind of money that we need to spend on the research? Research is risky by definition. Research has to be an applied research beyond the basic research. And the input relationship, which we founded as part of the TRDDC, is something which we need to practice day in and day out. So I think the research component of this country is fairly low. The participation between the public sector and the private sector is again has to be enhanced. And if we have to achieve self-sufficiency and supply chain disruptions which are happening, the basic element of investing for the future becomes absolutely critical. I mean, you cannot be in a situation today, for example, US is facing a semiconductor industry shortage because most of the production has gone out of the US. Whether it's in Taiwan, whether it's in Korea, whether it is in China or in Singapore or whatever. Whereas the energy deficiency because of the dependency on the Russians and the Ukraine example is playing out very critically. Germany went out of all their nuclear plants and then they are completely shut down that. And again, their dependency on oil, which leads to another problem, namely the climate change itself. These are all interconnected. So I think we need to fearlessly invest in R&D, appropriate R&D, affordable R&D, and access to the masses is as much important as simply saying that I'm R&D for the bigger initiatives and not for the people at large. Public health research, affordable devices as an example. Affordable devices, access to the devices, appropriateness of the device, and solving a healthcare issue. So the problem definition is absolutely critical, and then you can invest the research dollars or the research outcomes into those problem-solving mechanisms. To do not have an output measure and output in terms of impact, research for the sake of doing research is not the right way. One is inadequacy of the research dollars, collaboration that is needed for the highest level. Third is fearlessly encompassing so that more researchers come. What I'm witnessing today is the startups have a research mindset. Corporations which are mature are running as if there's no challenge because nobody is coming behind us. But I think the disruptors today are a lot more powerful than what it was. The whole industry gets disrupted. And that's the challenge one faces. It's not another number 2 company or number 3 company that is your competition. There's the disruptors who are going to make it, and there's enough case studies on that, and enough witnesses which we are seeing. Whether it's the music industry, whether it's the supply chain industry, whether it's the medium small industry, there's global collaboration industries. All these are disruptors completely. What we never thought, because if you take the Japanese automotive industry, which started, it was just manufacturing some components at a low cost. That was the advantage Japan gave and Americans gave a little bit. But then as they began scaling up, they bring in the quality concepts, and suddenly you find that the auto industry from Japan was second to none. Then the Americans requested them to set up the plants in the US so that their expertise, their knowledge, and their ability to train the workers become a way of life. So the transition from one phase to another, same thing we did in the offshoring and the IT industry itself. It started as a cost arbitrage, but today it is a capability which is the most critical thing. The innovation capital is what India is trying to achieve. And with the government policies and what we need to do, the innovation ecosystem from the large corporations to the smallest entrepreneur has to be encouraged. Innovation for commercial or innovation for social good if you want to address the social problems.
So if I summarize your very enlightening remarks, first of all, at the country level, there is a lot which the public sector research backbone, which has been established, the national labs and CSIR and so on. And then they are doing their bit. And if I remember my statistics right, about 0.8% of GDP, I think, is going towards the public sector R&D. But again, the efficiency with which it gets translated is, you mentioned BioSuite as one example where they collaborated with industry, in this case TCS, to commercialize some of that research. But lots more needs to be done. Then there are leading organizations, and you took the example of Tata Group, where 2.5% of revenues are being spent on R&D. annually. But there are others who don't spend anything at all, and they are the ones who are likely to be at risk because of these disruptors, not just within their own industry, but from everywhere else. Could be startups, it could be any others, and there are so many examples. And third, there are international examples of countries which are systematically doing this. I think you mentioned almost all the major names, whether it's the Japanese and the Koreans, or the Chinese, or the Israelis, and others who are on this journey, and we have to catch up significantly in that sense. And it is everybody, it is startups for, of course, business benefit, but also social good. And I think that's a very important fact, because all R&D does not have to be for a commercial outcome. It can be for a social impact that a country and complexity that we remarked earlier during the sustainability discussion will have so much more of impact on this kind of a story. Now, coming to the fact that this is, sorry, sir.
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that since this session is it's in the IIT Madras Research Park that you have visited, you are on the board of this entity when it was founded. It's in the Alumni Center, which is the first of its kind, at least in India. What is the role of such interventions? The IITs have established research parks, and now many IITs and IISc Bangalore also is setting up a research park. IIITs are setting up research parks on that side. And then role of alumni in actually doing a more positive connector role, which you also remarked that there is a need for all these ecosystem players to connect and engage with each other. Could you enlighten us on your view, sir? The translational part.
I think it's an excellent question and a segue into what we want to talk about. One is Alumni Center, which is adjacent to an IIT or an IISc or any of the other colleges, etc., is not a simple retiral home. We have to keep it at the back of our mind. It is beyond a retiral home, which essentially challenges your mind exactly the same way when you are a younger professional. The second thing is the professional, as a professional, which I have been always saying is, what is your contribution to enhance the professional competency of this nation? So all of us must remember that. And when we said that we had to become members of the IEEE, even as a student member or an IEEE member or a senior member or Computer Society of India or any of these bodies, it was to increase your professional competence as well as enable others to learn from you. So this is absolutely critical. Second thing is the fact that it is located next to the IIT or the IISCs. The forefront and state-of-the-art thinking in that space, in any of the disciplines which they practice, or interdisciplinary nature of collaboration, that can come to fruition through the alumni network in terms of startups emerging out of this. You get the best resources in terms of a research institution or an academic institution, and you bring in the faculty who are at the state of the art, who are able to spend the time because that is completely open and permitted today. On the other side, you have the entrepreneurs, and you yourself are an entrepreneur, or you're nurturing an entrepreneur through multiple mechanisms. Even a simple example as if IISc is starting today a school of health and a discipline in health with an interdisciplinary nature, IIT Kanpur has done it or doing it, or IIT Kharagpur has done it. These are all where multidisciplinary, multiple startups and multiple ecosystem creations becomes a way of life. That is the opportunity we all as alumni, we all as professionals must look at and contribute. I'm not saying contribute in monetary terms, but contribute in terms of the intellectual knowledge and the intellectual well-being. When I meet a startup today, the discussions are solely, why do you want me, rather than what do you want from me? So why do you want me? The only 2 or 3 things which the young professionals ask of you. You all are built together an institution and scaled it up. We have the same challenge of scaling up. Can you give us a bunch of ideas on doing it? They're not again doing a transaction-based relationship where they say, if you give me one connect, then I'll give you some money. No, that doesn't happen that way. So I think the opportunity for the Alumni Center with the kind of openness of the ecosystem that has been created, both at IIT, IISc, and the other technology parks, is an amazing scale-up problem that is being addressed. The innovation nation, as I talked about a little while ago, is what is being possible, and you are a part of that journey. That's the way we need to see it as a professional, and that's the opportunity that is getting created. And you learn a lot in the process. And the satisfaction of being a professional and intellectually or with hands or any combination thereof becomes a way of life and becomes possible. And that's the way I see it.
So it's a very heartening vote of support that you've given us, and we'll redouble our efforts to live up to that. In fact, the inspiration of this kind of center was that we looked at the way in which at least some of the international universities who have gone ahead of us, the Oxford and the Cambridge ones in the UK, or Imperial College or Stanford, MIT, Yale, Princeton, alumni centers have played a huge role in their success, MIT alumni and so on. So we are replicating it in a perhaps 50 years or 100 years later than them, but it's on to a good start. Happy to report that the Alumni Center Chennai is already now got a reciprocal with the IIT Alumni Center in Bangalore, which has come up in or will come up in Electronic City the next few months. And then IIT Kharagpur, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, many others are also thinking about replicating not just research parks, but also the same alumni center where, as you rightly said, the young minds, the not so young minds, but the experience sharing informally can happen over a cup of coffee or a drink of some sort, and then magic things will happen. And that's the journey that we are on. So very heartening to get your vote of support, and I hope that you personally will watch us on this journey and guide us through this
I'll
story.
watch you on this journey.
I'm going to quickly,
and also I want to assure you, I'll try and become a member.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. So there is a question on the chat from Ramdas. Should we not be promoting frugality at the consumption level? That contradicts with increased consumption for economic development. I think it's in relation to that sustainability discussion that happened.
No, that's exactly what I said. We as individual citizens or collectively, we have to relook at our whole consumption pattern, whether it is water, air, energy, etc., which I talked about. I think that automatically brings in a level of frugality. And frugality comes by even a corporate example, or if somebody pushes you to say that you have to do it at this cost, automatically you're going to relook at your processes and the way you look at things. And frugality is a very similar example in a social context where affordability versus non-affordability is the biggest gap which you are creating in this whole society. How do you address some of those challenges, whether it's education, access to education, platform-based education with a smartphone. Similarly, health tech, access to healthcare, and access to healthcare in any part of the world, in any part of the country, in the remotest part. Access to skills. I think these are the things which will bring in a level of consciousness. And consciousness and economic growth must be intertwined rather than you do something on economically and then we say that if I generate money, I'll do the consciousness part of it. No. It is like strategy and implementation integrated together, in that the consciousness and what I stand for should be incorporated. If I stretch this imagination a little more, Anand, when you look at the artificial intelligence and the kind of worries about it replacing the human intelligence or the human brain itself, which is a non-thinking, continuously doing. So people are talking about how do you bring in this emotional component into artificial intelligence itself? Is it possible? It is not possible, but this is the latest level of thinking with regard to how do you make the chatbots or the bots human, and the way humanity practices this, and we have a role to play in that. And that's the kind of thinking we have to bring into consciousness. It's not like things which is standing alone and they're trying to retrofit into the operations of a corporation, but has to integrate it into a way of life. It's like the quality movement. It's like the business excellence. I think all of these are a way of life, and what you practice is a day in and day out. Then you would see the kind of challenges to tackle, and you will absolutely tackle those things. That's the way I feel it. It has to be an integrated whole, rather than a standalone which gets retrofitted, and that's the way we need to look at it. When you look at automobile industry and it has completely been renamed as a mobility industry, you're seeing end-to-end the whole mobility and the consciousness and the frugality part of it inbuilt into that.
So on artificial.
I lost you. Anand. Hello. Are you there? Can't hear you. Are you there, Anand?
On artificial intelligence.
You have to repeat, Anand. I couldn't hear you for a few moments.
Sorry, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that we lost the connection for just a minute or so, but I was just going to summarize and say some of the remarks that you made, especially in the context of AI and that emotional component of AI and so on. We had Professor B. Ravindran talk to us. He's an IIT Madras distinguished professor, and he gave us a lecture just a few weeks ago. The context of AI, especially ethical AI, and the kind of challenges that poses not just India but the world at large, these are the kind of things at the cutting edge, and this requires that collaboration, not just amongst the computer scientists but social scientists and enlightened citizens like ourselves, and of course people with different backgrounds to come together, and then that is what will shape this technology journey going forward. I had one
Yes, the point you raised is absolutely valid, Anand. We had to recruit people with multidisciplinary and multiple discipline skills, because just having only engineers or programmers in an IT industry or only mechanical engineers or electromechanical engineers in an auto industry is not the solution. You have to have social scientists, you've got design experts, you've got the communication capabilities. It's integrated whole, again, as I keep repeating, and that's the nature of this. So when these multiple institutions or departments are created in a campus itself, how to integrate them, how do you make that possible is the role IIT Alumni Center can also play, where in a startup or interdisciplinary nature of talks which you organize will be extremely useful for people to understand what is needed.
Interdisciplinary is a wonderful point, sir. In fact, you would remember, and for the audience, the nature of research in TCS was designed to be interdisciplinary. TRDTC, which was our first research lab, had a very strong research group in materials and physical sciences and software engineering and computer sciences side by side. And that philosophy extended over the years into the biology and life sciences research, electronics and embedded systems research, and of course continuing the strength in computer science research as well. So interdisciplinarity is good, and then the role of such centers is to convene that interdisciplinarity and at all stages of development, startups onwards to finished products and into its usage. But switching gears in the last couple of minutes of this session, sir, I didn't.
Only one more input I want to give you, and for the benefit of the IIT Alumni Center, is to sensitize the bureaucrats on the role of policy making and science and the technology inputs into their own functioning. We can organize a bunch of webinar series through the public-private participation and the academic rigor that you can bring, and disseminating it to a larger audience of state government or central government or panchayats or districts or whatever it is. It will be one of the best services which we can provide. And a lot of people will definitely want to know this, and that's one of the biggest possibilities as I see it.
In fact, that kind of interaction is on our roadmap, and we want to get some of the public policy influencers. We're trying to tie up with the Chennai International Center, which is very well connected in that context, partner with them and bring them to this ecosystem and hold joint events. And as you said, even produce policy influencers. It's a very good suggestion. We'll certainly take it up, sir. Last question. I know that we are just about out of time, but we didn't spend enough in the early part of the session on your passion for photography and music. How do you find the time? I know that you're a very systematic person. You still get up very early in the morning and stay awake late in the evening, and you're so meticulous. But how do you find personal time for these two aspects? And then, as chairman of Kalakshetra, you're so deeply involved with the premier institution in India. A little bit on that side of your life, sir.
Art and music is something I have grown up with. All of us, when we grew up in Delhi, the music teacher used to come home and then make your sisters learn it, even though your parents didn't allow a male member of the family to go through this. But you heard it so much that automatically it became institutionalized in your own system. When you are abroad, when you are in those days, the only source of music was through audio tapes. As an example, you used to listen a lot. Occasionally, you would see some concerts. So I think the more you dwell into it, the more you started appreciating it. And today, the technology and the integration of music with technology is a way of life. Anywhere, anytime, any place, anyone, you can listen to it. So that's the way you have. Then when you see institutions, whether it is the Sangeet Natak Academy or the Kalakshetra, I think the kind of contribution they have made and the journey they have made is historically so rich that you cannot but see this. Even in my travels, if I can find a little bit of a time to see a museum, a local museum with a guide that is there with you, I think that makes a lot of difference in appreciating and understanding. And these are events, even in the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum here, the kind of inputs you get once you show some interest. And it's something participatory where the entire family or entire family friends can be a part of this whole thing. And then you also support through some of the trusts which we have, the music and art, your own personal trust. I think that's the way. Photography is another one where nature parks, nature reserves, birds, these excite you a lot. Again, you start remembering your younger days. So I think any bird chirping or any noise or anything, you immediately take the camera and then start doing it, or keep the camera right there at the time in the morning, early morning, whatever. I think these are some things which have again got institutionalized, but it's as much passionate as what it is, except that I'm able to spend more time than while I was in my professional life as the CEO or as we were growing up in DCS. So I think it's something which everyone would cherish. You'll connect the pieces, connect the dots, and it's again a learning experience, and the richness of the learning and the two-way learning becomes all the more exciting. And technology absorption, adoption anywhere, whether it's for a child care, whether it's for a surgery, whether it's for a dental care, whether it is for education or any of these, I think becomes very meaningful at the end of the day. Like I said, the impact is on how many people you touch rather than how much money you made.
Fantastic, sir. And out of personal experience, I do remember those trips to museums, the photographs. I have your picture that you took of me and standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate. You know, I would have never done that myself, but you pulled out your camera and took a picture, which I still have.
Yeah.
So, any closing remarks?
The closing remarks I want to say, anybody who is part of our ecosystem, especially with the IIT Alumni Center, one is you must have an inquiry or an inquisitive mindset. Second is you must believe in innovation and put your money into innovation or put your ideas into innovation. And the last I being the impact, whether it's for social good or for commercial good. I think this is the three I's I would practice: inquiry, inquisitive mindset, innovation, and impact. And during the implementation, the process excellence for scale up, and a culture of being together, collaborating together, and can-do attitude must set in. And IIT Alumni Center, you stretch your bar, raise your bar to any level with the collaboration that is possible and the proximity to the best minds. You can't get a better opportunity than this, and I would love to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, sir. Inquisitive, innovative, together. That makes IIT. So I think we'll really thank you for this, and thank you for all the words of wisdom. The recording will go up on our YouTube channel, and I'll make sure that you get the link as well. For all the persons who participated, personal thanks. I know that we couldn't take too many questions. There is a survey poll for those who have logged in online, so you can see that on the online invitation. Do send us your feedback on what and how we should improve this session. and stay well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.